Welcome to the Boardroom Zen. I am your host, Megha Joshi. In this show, we hear the untold stories and best practices from world-class business executives on how they deal with pressure and setbacks in the boardroom and beyond. Yes, these business leaders are no superhumans, but they have found their unique formula to stay grounded and bring their A-game to the table amidst the chaos. So let's begin. In today's episode, we'll talk about how integrating playfulness with work can be a game changer. Leaders of today are expected to not just lead with their minds, but their hearts in this environment of uncertainty. So today, I bring to you a unique guest who has lived and worked across North America and Asia. He is an award-winning innovator, design thinker, author, and digital transformation leader. As the CEO of Play2Transform Group, he provides guidance to the C-suite, using the principles of design and play to foster a culture of human-centric innovation. With no further delay, I'd like to welcome Dr. Avinash Jhangiani to this show and request him to share some key highlights from his personal journey and evolution as a leader.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this platform. It's great, speaking to you and having this exchange. A few things I'd love to just kick off with is be very accepting and acknowledge the environment we are in today, right? Because if you see the way the last 2 years have gone, I think it's important to highlight that in some ways we as a humanity have got a reality check, right? In terms of how we need to be, thinking, feeling and behaving, right, in the world around us. And this is not just, just from a work of from this entire space of corporate or professional life. It is also about how we look at our own lives, right? So as we go along, I'll be happy to share a few anecdotes of what I've gone through. But just to step back a little bit, do a flashback. So I come from India. I was born and brought up here. School education, typical industrial age. The only thing I remember about my school was that every time I used to raise my hand and ask a question to my teacher, she used to say, please keep your hand down, and that curiosity in some way, right, used to get killed, because a lot of that, I feel a lot of us have also gone through being in Indian schools. And I think a lot of that been ingrained into my DNA right from the get-go. However, immediately after I graduated, I did my electronics engineering from India. My first job itself gave me an opportunity to move to the US. And that, I think, in some ways really changed the way I looked at things. Obviously, as you might imagine, since you're there as well, that it's a very structured place to be in, right? Discipline is important. And just, it's that whole, everybody acknowledges you, right, as a human first and then anything else. It also gives you that opportunity to really think big and to really dream, right? Which I didn't get, to be very honest, in India. So in some ways, although I didn't walk into the US, thinking, I'm going to become a citizen and, green card and all of that, I didn't really have any of that in mind. I just wanted to explore, it was my initial journey, right, stages in my journey. And I immediately, so at that time, after I worked in the IT space, so I began this whole journey, as a programmer. Behind the screen and not interacting with anyone. I was very shy, an introvert, and my world was my code and the screen. As you can imagine, being an introvert, I used to, I actually made the program as my best friend, right? I never used to interact with people. But then, right, so in order to really move, right, I started realizing that I can't be doing this all my life, right? And in some ways, the US really opened me up. I was able to express in ways I wanted to, right, without any inhibition. And I decided I'll get my MBA. So after I got my MBA, I got immediately placed with Deloitte, led development teams there, and then quickly moved to New York on the strategy side. So a lot of that started happening. And in some ways, I would say my journey really began after that, after I joined Deloitte, because I started interacting with clients, this whole thing called executive presence became very, very important. So it wasn't the screen anymore. It was real people, humans. So a lot of that discovery and my growth happened there on the job itself. And then after a stage, I would say about 6 years working with them, I had a kid. At that point, I decided, as you might imagine, consulting, travel, and all of that.
Right.
I had to stop, and I decided to go with an industrial in an industry job with a little bit of stability. And I wanted to enjoy the early years of my child, with my child. So I did that. So interestingly, I got a job. I got placed with Reliance, and in my last year of being with the US, so I was in the US for 12 years. I was heading their IT and digital in the US itself. I don't know if you heard of big cinemas, Reliance Media Works.
Oh yes, they're pretty well known.
So at that time, they were growing very fast in the US, and they wanted me to head their IT digital and shape their vision there. So I did that. And since I was making like 6 trips in a year to India, I was like, I think it's time to reevaluate my role and where we are as a unit, right? With my wife, my kid and everything. And my kid was 3 years old. So I said, okay, let's make the move.
Right.
And then we moved exactly a decade ago, right? 2011 in December. And then I guess the real discovery of who I am today really started.
So I love that, those spotlights, Avinash, especially, a few things that totally resonated with me was the fact that somehow in India, the creative freedom of the child or the human remains very subdued. I felt the same way growing up in India. And, for a big portion of my initial life, I was a nerd. And that was rewarded, believe it or not. That was rewarded in that ecosystem. So I totally see where you're coming from. And I also love the fact that you had clarity around your own priorities in life and where you wanted to take your career. And by the way, that was a bold move to kind of give up everything you had built here in corporate America and step away completely, back to, a country that had evolved significantly in the past, decade or so that you were here.
If I didn't do it then, I don't know when this would happen, right? And you won't believe it that a lot of the fear and the pressure actually comes from the outside world. That,
of
oh my
course.
God, are you serious? You have a green card and you want to give it up and all of that, right? Like as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So you won't believe that I actually created a spreadsheet. Here, I'm a consultant, so I'm going to do that, right? With the pros and cons. So the moving to India journey has been as intense as that, as rational as that. So I believe a lot of this, fear is actually given to us from the outside world. And as you know, right, in Indian societies, with the pressure of relatives and friends and all of that, everybody will question any big move you make.
Oh, yes.
Right. So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself if you're up for it or not.
Love it. Love it. So tell us about your, how you reinvented yourself in India.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little anecdote and then maybe it'll be a good segue into the reinvention.
Sure.
Because the assumptions, as I was saying, right? The assumptions you make, all the spreadsheets you make before moving to India came crashing down within the first 3 weeks of us moving here. So I walk into my office on one day and my assistant, close right hand, he approaches me and says, "Sir, our website has been hacked." Now I am leading. So it's the third week into moving into India, right? And I have moved lock, stock and barrel. And I'm assuming, we have all the security in the world, right? Because this is a large enterprise. Why on earth and who on earth can ever hack us, right? And the reason, right? So I'm like, are you joking, right? Like, how can they go through so many? And I'm not going to give you the details in terms of the security infrastructure we had in there, but it was almost impossible for anyone to go into that kind of an environment where you have so many individuals looking over security, whether it's physical or virtual, and being hacked. So I said, okay, we'll have a look and see where we are. So I go to I go to the website, I open up the browser and I go to my site and I see a big kind of a web page, right? The home page has been replaced with the hackers, and these are the anonymous hackers. I don't know if you heard of them, but they are the most, dangerous or the most kind of skilled hackers in the world. They do their stuff and they just walk away. And so I looked at my assistant. I said, are you serious? Is this really happening to us right now? And how could this happen? So I picked up the phone and I spoke to my CISO, who's actually the head of security right at the enterprise, the group level. And I say, this is what is happening. So he says, yes, we are aware of it. So I'm like, interesting. So fine. Is there any action plan as to what we are going to do? So he says that it's absolutely up to you because it's your website and you're in charge. So please direct. So I'm like, interesting that you are the security head and you're asking me, for direction. So,
right.
So
it's the command and control thought process.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay. So then I start looking at the site and the anonymous group has thrown in there that we are going to be tweeting about how we are going to bring down your website in a bit. It's only the homepage we have done now, but we are going to be acquiring all your credit card information of all your users, and we'll be doing that in the next hour. And all this is being tweeted in real time on Twitter. And they have also shared the handle of their newly created Twitter handle on the homepage, allowing everybody to access it and track the way the entire site is getting hacked.
Oh my Lord.
Okay, so I'm freaking out. Obviously, I have to keep my calm, right? It's
sure.
that I'm leading this team of 150, digital/IT people, and I have to keep them be a leader. At times, the way we've been born and brought up and we've seen leaders is that we've been told, be brave, do not be vulnerable, don't ask for help, right? Because and especially in India, the expectation is that if you're the boss, you have to say what needs to be done. Okay, it's as simple as that. So I'm like, I'm not used to this kind of working, right? I need help. I don't know what am I supposed to do right now because this is totally out of my control. And plus, all kinds of feelings and thoughts run into your mind because you just moved from the US and you're cursing yourself. What the hell did I do? Why did I move here? And this had to happen to me. Why now? All these questions, right? And so I just look at the entire issue, and a lot of the things that I'll be sharing with you now is what my mom has ingrained into me while I was a kid, because as a kid, I had a hitch in my speech. I used to stammer. And you don't see a lot of that now because, she actually has given me a lot of tips. And every time she told me, listen, every time you are in a crisis, understand that the crisis is not you. Don't define your identity with the crisis. The crisis is here. A situation is here to teach you something. And the only thing you will, as soon as you start understanding this fact and appreciating that you are on a journey and these spikes of emotions are going to happen, accept it, step yourself aside. It is only an emotion. And I remember these words. She ingrained this in me. Happiness, fear, all of this are emotions. The moment you understand that you are not that emotion and you can take charge, then you will find the right kind of solution. The thing that I need to address here, as a leader is how do I look at this situation and flip it on its head? And how do I do it in a way that does not rock anybody's boat, if you know what I mean?
Totally.
Right? So I decided that since I don't have anything in my control here, they are advertising the hell out of this on Twitter. I'm going to just go right to the hardware. I'm going to plug out the hardware servers from this entire thing so that they cannot update anything that we own as a company, right? So I literally had to go to the source. I went into the HIDA center and I told my guy, where is the plug point? I'm going to plug it.
That is unbelievable. And then, to my surprise, your security head or the team didn't necessarily have those instincts to take that first step. They were waiting for you to walk into the data room and potentially come up with solutions.
Exactly. So is what the thing is, right? When these roles are given to you, you don't know what is actually your job and how empowered you are as opposed to others, right? So then I did that, and then I could breathe a little bit, right? Just take a breather and say, okay, I think if we cannot, I couldn't go into an attack mode. I can only do this. So I did that. But interestingly, within an hour of doing that, I get a call from a big boss who I don't even know. And he threatens me and says, who are you to shut our business down? So I'm like, what is going on over here, right? Like, I think so I was just quiet because, if you can imagine, if there's a big guy up there, then you just have to be a little humble, and you just have to say that, listen, here's what I thought as a leader. I have some kind of, I'm empowered to do this. If you have any better ideas, let's go for it. Because I understand there's an impact on the revenue and everything, but I think it's more important to now take care of one, our brand, and two is the credit card information. A few learnings from here is what I would like to share is that I really realized that you cannot have everything in your control. As much as you can plan, your entire life and say, hey, I have a spreadsheet and I have a great team. What can go wrong? If something has to go wrong, it will go wrong. The big learning from all of this is what I then took away to reinvent myself years later was that let's not take everything so seriously. Right. And especially in India, everybody laughs at me every time I say this. Right. And a lot of my friends and relatives say, oh, my God, I don't know how you're surviving there. I'm like, embrace the chaos. Find your harmony in this chaos, because the moment you find that joy and, you see that, yes, you have a way. Right. You just have to understand. And, it's difficult to articulate this in words, but it is an experience. And the more you do it, you start enjoying it. Actually, so you want to be in the crux of a lot of that, in order to keep your, I say, inner child alive.
Yeah, I love that. Embrace the chaos. That's incredibly powerful, Avinash.
Yep. Thanks.
So in your new, role as the CEO of Play2Transform Group, right? You have extended yourself in many, many different areas, and obviously your accomplishments, not just the India level, but internationally speak to it. In this capacity, you also work with the C-suite of major corporations, right? And you yourself have been under epic pressure, as you described this one
incident, yeah.
One incident, if you will, So as you work with those, other leaders or executives, what do you see most C-suite executives struggle with? I'm sure there's a variety of things they struggle with, but is there one key theme that you see emerging again and again? And then what guidance do you provide them?
Sure. So I can speak. So it has actually changed in the last 6 years, as you might imagine, thanks to the pandemic. Earlier, and I can speak to the clients which I advise in India. Earlier on, before the pandemic, I was trying to push for digital transformation, right? And I kept saying, hey, transformation for digital is not tech, it's human first. Nobody ever understood that, right? Initially, I used to bring in play, right? Because the whole notion of play is that how do you untap your inner child to drive creativity, resilience, or a lot of that, right? So, as you might know, right, in terms of a child, if you've interacted with children or have one, you will see a young child, but especially between the age of 4 and 7, how intuitively they know how to build things, how intuitively, they know how to become this favorite superhero, or maybe instinctively just self-organize themselves with other children to play games, right? A lot of that I have attempted to bring into the C-suite, because if you look at leaders today, and especially the space that we are in today, a lot of uncertainty, right? A lot of chaos, a lot of ambiguity. Now it's not just about accelerating digital transformation, right, and innovation. It is also the leader's responsibility to ingrain initiatives like ESG, JIDE, inclusion, diversity, and environment into their agendas. Now, this is huge, right? In terms of responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
on top of all this, expecting leaders to just not do this more with a human-centric style. But then let's not forget improving shareholder value, which is always the reason why a business exists.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to deliver all of this, right? Now, the simple answer to this, although obviously it's not very simple, the moment you start realizing that it's not about you, right? It's about who you're serving, right? It's about creating new value into other people's life, then your feelings, thoughts, and behaviors shift, right? So a lot of the work that I do with CXOs is in this space, because the way the CXOs and leaders, especially in India, have been born and brought up to believe is that you have to be strong. You cannot show that other side because, it'll be seen as weakness. You have to be authoritative. You have to direct. You have to be very, very bold in the way you do this. And so, if you look at this way of leadership, it's not going to work today or as we walk into the future. And here's why, right? Because you can be a lot of those things if you know where the world is heading, which we knew in the industrial age, right? About 20 years back or 30 years back, it was the way of life. We had, a way of doing things. But now I believe we are in the transition of moving into a digital age or the information age, right? Everyone and India more, right? Because of the last 2 years, everybody's opted on digital. But where the struggle I feel is that we have a gap between the way people think about digital and do digital. So my role and what I advise to CEOs is that you need to start understanding this is not about the tech application. It's about how they function. They're agile. They are obsessed about who they are serving, right? And in order to do this, your organization needs to have the right kind of culture, a psychological safe space for expression, co-creation, to do a lot of this changing in behaviors, and that ability to be brave and experiment, right? A lot of that is very important, but it starts with you. If you do not lead the way, if you do not drop your guard, right, as they say, start being more human, right? Stop being a robotic leader with authority, right? And is what I say to these guys, a lot of them obviously men, that please start untapping that inner child. And it's not hard if you allow yourself to just be or go back. So a lot of my workshops, I'll give you an example, is what I do. The first thing if there's a fresh face and I don't know the guy, I make them go back into their state of being a child. So I do that exercise with them. I'm just giving you a few things, strategies that I use. And one of the things I do is this whole exercise where I ask them to just shut their eyes and I take them on a journey to who they were as a child. Now, the moment I'm just giving you the crisp, version of this entire exercise. You then start untapping that inner child and you start realizing that joy is something that comes naturally to me, right? Empathy, right? Reaching out, being curious, helping others, having an open heart, experimenting is all we did as a child. So we just need to bring those, right? And we just need to bring those feelings and behaviors back into our life. Now, easier, we can preach this, but ultimately they have to make this into a habit.
Yeah. And by the way, learning through experience, as you're saying, and living it is so different than just hearing somebody else say it, right? So I see you leveraging the power of visualization to help those executives tap into their inner genius and intuition.
Absolutely. And their journey starts from there. Because the moment you do that, you help them reflect. I also ask them to write a journal every night, which they hate doing, but I say just do it for me. And a lot of them, after 3 weeks, they revert saying, hey, a few things are happening. I don't know what's happening, but I'm getting feedback from people that I'm a little different. I'm a little more open. I'm a little more approachable. And I'm saying that, listen, which is what is good news, right? It's going to start there, because as soon as you start writing your thoughts down, as soon as you start untapping that inner child and keep that curiosity alive, right? So I do a lot of things, other things with teams also, right? In terms of giving them play toolkits like Lego, Play-Doh, ice cream sticks. A lot of this, when they start doing on a regular basis, right? Then really the change starts. Right. And behavior change is not an overnight journey, right? It's going to take time. But with that said, it's important to reflect, because a lot of them will start off saying, hey, we are excited, but then they forget on reflection and self-improvement, because it's like a habit. You can't say I'm done with your consulting and I'm good to go, right? And I can now thrive in this uncertainty. It's not going to happen, because it's a journey, right? And you're going to discover your unique style. And it's what I believe is really important across leadership, whether you're a young leader or a senior leader. Thanks to education system, even young leaders are influenced to do the same thing that senior leaders have been doing, right? Because they've been told that work seriously, all right, be professional, right? So a lot of this, when you're told over and over again, and you start seeing your seniors do that, you want to mimic them. So the news which I have to share with everyone and all leaders out there is that, listen, be in charge of your inner child, because everybody has that unique child. And as soon as you realize who that individual is, you will develop that style and everybody's going to love you.
Avinash, we're getting to the close of this show today. What parting thoughts would you share with the listeners?
So two things. I think I'm just going to recap a lot of the things that I've done. But I mean, we've done and I've done and practiced and also spoken about in the last 20 minutes. Is I think it's time. It's high time we start moving from working seriously to playing seriously. Right, with that inner child, right? Just untapping that inner child and really reflecting, right? Every day, at the end of every day before you sleep, spend 15 minutes, right? Just asking yourself, how did it go? How are you feeling today? And a lot of that really will bring back your creativity, your curiosity, your ability to adapt and be more resilient comes from that inner child. That ability to play with chaos. Now, it doesn't mean that you think like a child all the time. You should be able to situationally switch on your childlike mindset depending on, the circumstance. So it's almost like an entanglement between being an adult and a child, right, in the mind. And that I would encourage leaders and CXOs to start doing. Within that, you will find harmony in chaos.
Wow. I love that. That is so powerful. Especially, your insights around tapping into the inner child and shifting, from just work to including play into the mix so we can deal with chaos and be more open to it. It's very powerful words of wisdom. So in closing, Avinash, I would like to say that it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You've been incredibly generous with your insights. And I'm pretty certain that my listeners will enjoy listening to this show as much as I have personally enjoyed and learned from your own experience. So thank you for being you and for bringing your true self to this show. And I appreciate you as well as all my listeners. Thank you all.
Great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be me, right? You don't get a lot of platforms out there. But I think importantly, giving me the opportunity to share my insights, my experience, and what I feel really optimistic of this new age of leadership and keeping that inner child alive. A lot of that you will be reading in my next book, which is coming up next year. So I hope, I'll see you then as well.
Absolutely. Cannot wait. There is no better time than now to build resilience, lead mindfully and with purpose. We all deserve to live our very best life. This show is brought to you by The Resilient Human, a company on a mission to develop authentic leaders that thrive amidst pressure and have the courage to write their own story. A sincere thanks to all my listeners for the precious time and presence. If you genuinely enjoyed the show, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. Be well, and I can't wait to see you at the next episode of the Boardroom Zen.